To Madam Filth. As you commanded, I'm making my way to Chicago. I understand now that there's no point in resisting your will. You've always had a way of bending others to it, haven't you? I'm prepared to accept whatever role you've decided for me. I've learned that sometimes the best way to survive is to submit, to let the current carry you where it will. But don't mistake this for weakness, Madam Filth. I'm not broken, just adaptable. Despite the stories you may have fed my old associates in the Sabbat, I have had contact with some who have yet to hear your tales, and through them, I've been informed that you may have Amelia after her disappearance in London. I think I finally understand the extent of your game. You gave the Sabbat every reason to try to abduct Amelia, assuming correctly that they would try a direct approach to simply grab her. When she avoided capture from the pack, she found herself on the run looking for safe harbor. Let me guess. You reached out, or had one of your puppets do so. When Amelia reached for an open hand of friendship, that's when you had your pet snake to snatch her under the guise of guiding her to safety. I've heard the stories about Jasmine, the follower of Set who made her way through half the capitals of Europe sowing chaos. I'm not surprised she works for you. Is that what you have in mind for me? Being some kind of honeypot in scheme after scheme, luring your victims in with lust or desperation? You should know that my compliance with your will is conditional on Amelia being safe and unharmed. Once I've verified that, I'll do whatever you want. But if she's been poorly treated, I will express my displeasure with violence upon you and yours. If you say anything to Peter, you and I will also have problems. As a blackmailer, you'll understand why I'm reluctant to just take your word on matters, and will be vigilant in making sure your promises are kept. You've always had a talent for finding the cracks in people's armor, for worming your way in until there's no defense left. It's something I've come to respect in a twisted sort of way. You've stripped away everything I thought I was, left me bare and raw, forced me to confront my choices. It's funny, as time goes on, our choices become more like a prison, which we try to mitigate. Where I've chosen to love someone, you found weakness. Where I've decided to be kind, you've seen an opportunity to hurt me. But I'm not blameless, I know that. I cooperated with you to manipulate Amelia's affections. It's far from my only sin, but it is the sin I committed that led me to this place. I know now that the only way through this moment is to suffer for that sin. Obsession is an expensive habit, and yearning for Amelia has put me in this hole. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't painful, but maybe that's the point. Pain has a way of revealing the truth, doesn't it? And you've never shied away from showing me exactly who I am, even when I didn't want to see it. Pain is one of our greatest teachers. I learned that during my crucible of fire in the Sword of Caine, and it's a lesson I never forgot. Horror and pain were my constant companions in those early years, as they are with all of us. I remember those years well, but beyond the experiences which would shape me, there was a woman, a Toreador. Beautiful, of course, but different from the other Cainites in my first pack. She was always in the vanguard of all of our operations, eager to fight and inflict suffering on others, never shy about taking a bullet herself, but quiet. She didn't speak often. She didn't join our joyous praise of Cain or vocalize her prayers to the Dark Father. She was an angel of death in battle, screaming with bliss while engaging in slaughter. But as quiet as a church mouse when it came time to worship. I would later come to discover that Little Rose was a member of the Bahari, the Cult of Lilith. That delicious little heretic had snuck her way into the Sabbat for some strange religious purpose, and when I discovered her infiltration, I was more curious than angry. Surely it was suicide. What could bring such a pretty thing to risk such suffering? Back then, I was a lot more like you. I liked to play with my food. I wanted to know about a faith that would bring a woman who could have anything to a place where she danced along the edge of a knife. And when I confronted her, rather than seeking to escape or to silence me to hide her secrets, she opened up. She told me the story of Lilith, or at least as far as she knew it, and the gardens and betrayal and love and lust, and most of all, she spoke of pain. It was the topic of pain that truly intrigued me, having endured what I had. I grew closer to her, this rose wrapped in thorns. She would teach me about the Bahari, and I would ask questions about her faith. We became lovers and explored the complex philosophies of Lilith's worshippers, and it stopped being a game for me and became something like temptation. I wonder what the Cult of Lilith would make of a woman like you, Madam Filth. Perhaps they would approve. Perhaps they would tear your limbs from your body and bury you beneath a tree that might nourish itself from your blood. No way to know for sure. In these dark moments, when I think of how you've stripped away everything I thought I knew about myself, I found a strange solace in the teaching of the Bahari. Have you ever heard of them, Madam Filth? They are more than a cult. They are a movement, an ideology devoted to Lilith, the Dark Mother, who they believe is the true progenitor of all supernatural beings. According to this Lilith cult, the myths we've been fed are lies that tell us Caine was the first and only. The Bahari believe that it was Lilith who taught Caine everything, made him something of importance rather than the rootless drifter God had left him. And Caine would repay her generosity with betrayal and abandonment. To them, Lilith is the mother of all that is unnatural, including kindred, the first to embrace the darkness and find power within it. It goes without saying that in the Sabbat, this cult is viewed as grotesque heresy. But in the Camarilla as well, there's great hostility to this faith. Some among the ivory towers secretly believe in the fragmented stories from the Book of Nod, of course, but there are other stories of Lilith which directly relate to Camarilla concerns, not the least of which are the stories of Lilith's relationship with high and low demons, which is naturally cause for concern among both sects, with their attitudes towards infernalism being what they are. What I know about the Bahari came mostly from the lips of my heretical rose, and I can make no statements about the truth of it. But it is a hell of a tale. So why don't you just sit back on your fainting couch in whatever rancid sewer you may be reading this letter in and pay close attention as Melanthia tells you a story. Long, long ago, before great cities and running water, world wars, or medicine, or even kindred or animal husbandry, there was a garden called Eden. And in this garden, God created a man and a woman to share in the beauty and wonder of what he made of the earth. And unlike what you've read in the Bible, this is not Adam and Eve. It was Adam and Lilith. That's right, Madam Filth. According to the Bahari, the first woman was Lilith, not Eve, in the origin story of mankind. God's intention seemed to have been to create a loving couple who could enjoy the paradise he had built, to marvel in their immortality and bliss for eternity. But it didn't work out. The Bahari, or Lilins, as they sometimes refer to themselves, don't know why Lilith didn't get along with Adam, but they believe that a rift formed between the two primordial humans early on. Lilith was disinterested in life as Adam's wife, and according to the Lilins, Adam's response was to attempt to assault her sexually. As you might imagine, this did little to improve Lilith's view of Adam, and she told God that she would have nothing to do with him. God was not happy and banished Lilith from Eden to walk the darkness of earth beyond its boundaries. The Bahari have different theories about what happened next, with some claiming that Lilith was the serpent who would tempt Eve, aided by Lucifer. But what they generally agree on is that God cursed Lilith with a terrible fate. From a fragment of the wrath of the Lord and his sevenfold curses. Thou hast tasted the wine of immortality, so thou shalt never die, but endure evermore until the closing of the eyes of the Ancient One, even as do I. And thou shalt perish at that time. And because thou hast spurnt my love, thou shalt love none other, though thou might strive to do so. And thy womb shall overflow with children, but they shall love thee not, nor be part of thee. And thine eyes shall see at night, but be blinded by the day, and thy skin shall crack in the sun of thy false love Lucifer, and shall heal under the light of the moon only. Thou hast become a shining one, but thy light shall shine only by night. For me, that sounds like hell. But I imagine it sounds familiar to you, Madam Filth. A series of lovers who steal your heart and can give nothing back sounds bad enough. But it goes beyond that. Imagine having children that never love you, friends who never love you. She was free to explore endless earth, but always existing in an emotional solitude. After a while, even freedom would feel like a prison one could never escape. Lilith would have affairs with several great beings, but they would always leave her. She traveled the world to learn its mysteries, but the greatest mystery would inevitably become a loving connection with another person. In the absence of that connection, Lilith sought some peace and harmony. Expelled from paradise, she began to work on her own gardens to nurture her broken heart. She began an affair with Lucifer, and as a gesture of kindness, the devil gave her the Cloak of Night, from which she plucked the stars and used them as seeds for her first garden called Ilona, the Garden of Hope. Lilith and Lucifer would travel together through the world and found a second garden called Dahainu, which was the Garden of Renewal. Lilith's curse carried with it the burden of fertility, and the devil impregnated her again and again, as did other creatures, which would eventually give her the title Mother of Monsters from what would rise from her womb. Lucifer would leave Lilith alone again, as would her children, and she began to roam, searching for some meaning to fill eternity. It would be in this time of loneliness that Lilith found Caine, and her heart melted in pity for him. Like her, he was alone, cursed by God to wander the land. Like her, he had been changed by his travels, and, like her, God's curses had taken the sun away from him, leaving him a child of darkness. She had learned the secrets of magic from God and Lucifer and her own experiences in the wastes of the world, and in her pity, she not only took Caine as a lover, but as her student. She would teach him the mysteries of his blood by giving her blood to him, and in doing so, unlock a mystical connection between Caine and the infinite. Once again, God's curse on Lilith took hold, however, and upon learning these secrets, which we would all come to understand as vampiric disciplines, he left Lilith alone again. I share with you a quote of a fragment of the Book of Nod itself, taken from the temptation of Caine. Then Lilith commanded that I stop, saying that I had overreached my bounds, that I had gone too far, that I threatened my very essence. She used her powers to command me to stop. Because of her power, I heeded her, but deep within me a seed was planted, a seed of rebellion. And when she turned her face from mine, I opened myself up once more to the night, and saw the infinite possibilities in the stars, and knew that a path of power, a path of blood was mine for the taking. And so I awakened in me this final path, from which all other paths would grow. With this newest power, I broke the bonds that the Lady of Night put on me. I left the damned queen that evening. Cloaking myself in shadows, I fled the lands of Nod, and came at last to a place where not even her demons could find me. To add insult to injury, the Lilins say Caine wouldn't just abandon Lilith. In time, he would return to her garden at Dahainu with the antediluvians and engage in the slaughter of her children and her plants, stealing secrets and power from the dying creatures and scattering the others. Some Bahari say that these creatures are what we know of as unnatural things of the world, the Fae, the moon beasts, and demons. And if that's true, I'm glad that Caine laid waste to it. I've always been skeptical of this part of the story, as it contradicts what the Nodists of the Sabbat had learned of this time, both ignoring the second generation as well as Caine's relationship with the antediluvians. Separate from its hostility to Caine, it is heretical, most of all, for its suggestion of Caine's relationship with the antediluvians. But as you might imagine, it was a sore spot for Lilith. The story goes on that Caine would build Enoch, and she would set herself on a path of vengeance, creating her third garden, Bahari, a garden of sorrows. In this place, she began to prepare for a time in the future, the time of Gehenna. In the meantime, legend has it that Lilith began to steal infants from unworthy parents, bringing them to her garden to learn at her feet of the horrors of this world. My sharp little Rose told me all of this in whispers as we lay together at night, hushed tones of reverence with us intertwined. I was fascinated by these myths, familiar yet different from my own faith. Heresy to be sure, but intriguing. I wonder about that, the power of a pretty face to lead a person down a path to damnation. For if I were a weaker woman, I would have been tempted. Looking back now, I want to be a bit embarrassed, for I knew that even in this distant memory I was seeking Amelia. But it's hard to be more embarrassed than you've already made me, so there's no point in it. With my understanding of Lilith now sufficient, she would then explain the Bahari. Those devoted to Lilith after thousands of years take her memory quite seriously. And in her telling, I was often reminded again of some warped mirror of the Sabbat itself. The Bahari believe that Lilith's curse was not a punishment, but a gift, a way to transcend the limitations of convention and to unlock the potential that lies within every one of us. They teach that Lilith, in her wisdom and wrath, shared her knowledge with Caine out of kindness, a desire to share what she had learned. Caine was merely a thief who stole the gifts meant for Lilith's true children, and then visited destruction upon Lilith's creation with those gifts. And it is this legacy, this stolen power, that the Bahari seek to reclaim. My Rose grew fervent as she spoke of these things. No more a silent mouse, but a hissing viper. They see Caine not as a father figure to be revered, but as a usurper who stole from Lilith. He was nothing, had nothing, just a murderer left to rot. The Bahari seek to overturn the order that Caine established, to bring about a new era where Lilith's power is recognized and revered. They are driven by a desire to spread the truth of Lilith's story, to awaken others to the lies they have been fed, and to recruit those who have been broken by the world, offering them a path to strength through pain. The Bahari don't see pain as something to be avoided or feared. To them, pain is enlightenment, a tool that strips away the illusions we cling to. They believe that suffering is the ultimate teacher, revealing truths that comfort and ease could never uncover. They say that Lilith, after being cast out from Eden, wandered the desolate lands, embracing the agony in her exile until it transformed her. Through her suffering, she discovered her true power, becoming something more than human, something divine. And in the stories of Lilith's travels, it is indeed how she unlocks things which sound familiar to our disciplines of the blood, which she would later teach to Caine. It's a story that resonates deeply with me now, in ways I never expected. As I make my way to Chicago, a wilderness of sorts for me, I too hope to uncover strength that I don't know of yet. I imagine I'll need it to endure whatever you have in mind for me. The Bahari also revere chaos as a creative force. To them, chaos is not an enemy of order, but its precursor. They believe that through destruction, new things are born, stronger, more resilient, more attuned to the true nature of reality. They see themselves as agents of this chaos, spreading pain and suffering as a way to break down the old and pave way for the new. It's a dangerous path, one that requires absolute conviction and an unwavering belief in the Dark Mother's teaching. Terrorism, war, and unrest are ways to churn the world and allow for opportunities for the Bahari faith to take hold in places where the consequences lead to devastation. And this world war raging around us, you can be sure that some parts of it were inspired, if not directed, by members of the Lilith cult. Unlike many blood cults, the Liliths also seem eager to include mortals in their worship, though I don't know if they reveal their vampiric natures to such people. The risk of discovery is high, however, and likely the thing protecting the masquerade is the fanatic commitment of those mortals to Lilith. The Bahari choose their acolytes from among individuals with broken hearts or broken wills, people who have endured injustice and seek vengeance, those who have profound grief. Their candidates are like an echo of their Dark Mother, mistreated, abandoned, lost, suffering, but resolved to restore the balance in their favor, even with the most extreme acts. And of course, often the Bahari are authors of others' grief. Some of the most zealous of them imitate the legends of Lilith, abducting the children of men and women they feel unworthy of them, and either sacrificing those children to Lilith or raising them in the faith, depending on the needs of the cult. And the more depraved Bahari may one day return to that man or woman, finding them shattered, and seek to recruit them into Lilith's worship. The Bahari influence reaches far and wide, though they usually operate in clandestine ways. Their cells, known as gardens, existing in secret, hidden from the prying eyes of those who would oppose them. Both a base of operation for Bahari groups, as well as a physical location for worship, the garden is led by two individuals, usually Cainites. Some gardens have existed for centuries, monuments to a dedication to Lilith's memory and teachings, and usually each garden has a theme reflecting one of Lilith's, such as hope, renewal, or sorrow. The Liliths may pick new themes for their gardens, but one will find that many reflect Lilith's. The Bahari develop deep attachments to their gardens, often preferring death to abandoning their sacred spaces. My Rose told me of one such place. In Oslo, the Liliths had built a garden of suffering, where countless kindred had been imprisoned, tortured, and diablerized over a century. The Bahari of this garden disappeared mysteriously, their fate unknown even to the cult. There is a rumor of a Garden of Hope somewhere in Budapest as well. I wouldn't be at all surprised if a Cult of Lilith had a garden in Chicago. It might be something for you to look into. These gardens are places of transformation, where initiates are subjected to trials of pain and suffering, designed to strip away their old selves and bring them closer to the truth of Lilith's teachings. The Bahari are not a unified sect, but rather a collection of cells, each interpreting the Dark Mother's teachings in a new way. On rare occasions, such as when a particularly powerful Cainite needs to be laid low, when some of the great rituals must be cast, or when a great act of harm may be caused leading to chaos, the gardens of the Bahari in a region may come together to cooperate. Usually, though, each garden maintains its independence and secrecy. Dedicated to the parts of Lilith's teachings each finds most compelling. Some focus in the physical aspects of pain, while others delve into the psychological, exploring the depths of fear and anguish as paths to enlightenment. Others are more militant, seeking to destroy the existing order and bring about a new world shaped by the Dark Mother's hand. Some are focused on creating new gardens, fertile domains where they can cultivate their followers and spread their influence. Within their gardens, their sacred spaces, both physical and metaphorical, the Bahari practice rituals that push the boundaries of endurance. These rituals are not for the faint of heart. They are designed to break down the individual, to strip away the layers of pretense and reveal the raw essence within. In these gardens, pain is seen as a form of nourishment, something that feeds the soul and prepares it for the revelations that come with true understanding. The scars left by these rituals are badges of honor, symbols of the journey toward enlightenment. For the Bahari, the end goal is nothing less than the complete overthrow of Caine's world. They seek to spread the truth of Lilith over Caine, to bring her pain to both the living and the dead. This manifests in different ways. Some Bahari engage in acts of mass violence, targeting those they see as oppressors or enemies of the Dark Mother, while others work more subtly, manipulating events from behind the throne to bring about the changes they desire. They are patient, knowing the true transformation takes time and that the seeds they plant today may not bear fruit for generations. In the modern nights, the Bahari are more active than ever, seeing the chaos and suffering in the world as signs that Lilith's time is coming. They believe that Gehenna, the prophesied end of days, will be the moment when Lilith returns to reclaim what was stolen from her, to exact her revenge on Caine and all who follow him. The Bahari see themselves as her chosen, the ones who will stand by her side when that day comes, ready to remake the world in her image. This belief in Lilith's return drives everything they do. The Bahari are willing to endure any pain, any hardship, in the name of the Dark Mother. They see themselves as part of a larger plan, a cosmic shuffle between the forces of creation and destruction, with Lilith at the center. Their conviction is unshakable, their dedication absolute. They are the harbingers of a new world, one where pain is the key to power and suffering is the path to enlightenment. The nights I listened to my Rose tell me these secrets were a complicated time for me. I've always been haunted by a powerful curiosity, but I've never been an idealist. I remember the sadness in realizing that one day the Inquisition would uncover her and put her Bahari ideas about pain to the true test. I still remember making love to her on the night of that realization, the sweet taste of her lips on mine, the curve of her pale body with its ritualistic scars in the shape of a flower. She whispered her love for me, and I told her I loved her as well. I held her then, and time seemed to slow. We lay for what felt like eternity, and I can still remember the smell of lavender on her neck. I pulled my Rose to me and held her tight, kissing her one last time. She melted into me, bliss on her face, as I began to squeeze. The Rose was a dancer, a warrior of speed and grace. She was capable of elegant, surgical violence. But there, our bodies intertwined in the grass beneath the stars, there was no place to dance. Her eyes fluttered open, and she told me that I was hurting her. I said nothing as I applied my strength, snapping ribs and vertebrae as I held her. I will give her this. She did not scream. Understanding crossed her face, Madam Filth. She knew. She knew what I was doing and why. That I did not share her faith in her Lilith or in herself. That I had played with her heart to get what I wanted, much as you do each night. As she died in my arms, crushed under the strength that is the legacy of my blood, she saw the end of a cycle she had spoken to me of, stretching back to the beginning. Like Lilith, she had been betrayed by one she loved, one who had lied to her. She died with a nobility I have rarely seen in my immortality, and I do confess at the end, I felt some measure of guilt. She had deserved better. But one of the things you've taught me, Filth, is that what we may deserve has nothing to do with it. As I've written about their teachings, I've come to understand the allure of the Bahari. They offer a path to power that is unlike anything else, a way to turn the very things that once caused fear and weakness into sources of strength. Their belief that pain and chaos are necessary for growth resonates with me in a way I never thought possible. It's given me a new perspective on the trials I've faced, on the suffering I've endured, and on the role you've played in shaping me with what you are doing now. My Rose showed me that there is power in embracing the darkness, in letting pain guide my hand, and in doing so, I've come to see that the scars we bear are not just marks of our suffering, but symbols of our transformation, our journey towards something greater. But let's be clear. I'm not coming to you as the broken thing you hoped to create. I'm coming to you because I've learned to adapt, to survive, and to grow stronger from the trials you've put me through. The Bahari have shown me that there is power in embracing the very things that once frightened me, in turning pain into a source of strength. And while I may still play the role you've assigned to me, know that I do so with eyes wide open, aware of every lesson you've tried to teach. My obedience to you will depend on your silence with Peter and your kindness to Amelia. If I must endure the degradations you will put me through, I must know that there is some light in that dark pit. Amelia. Holding her. Being with her. That is what I will require to endure. For the promise of being with Amelia, I'll be a good girl, Madam Filth. I'll see you soon, as I'm sure you'll be eager to see how far I've come. I'm no longer the foolish woman you once deceived. I've become something far more resilient. And perhaps in the end, that's exactly what you wanted. But be careful what you wish for, Madam Filth. Sometimes, the things we create take on a life of their own. Submissively yours, Melanthia, Clan Lasombra, New York City, May 1945.